Hello there, and welcome back to Villa Kino here on Twitch. So, the Mandalorian is finally back. So, you know what that means. We're going to jump on, play some SWTOR, and talk about the most recent episode.
Yeah, hey everybody, good to have you on board. And we're looking forward to having a big conversation about that episode. Very, very cool to have live action Star Wars back on Disney Plus. We've been enjoying The Bad Batch, of course, but tonight we're going to focus on that installment of live action material, which was just really good to be back into.
So, of course, as always, this will be full of spoilers. So if you have not seen the very, very most recent episode, which is episode 17, but number 1 of season 3, do be sure to go watch that before listening in, because we're going to be talking about everything. We haven't had the time to watch the Bad Batch episode, so we will be saving that for another stream. So we won't be covering that one here.
We'll specifically stream again in about 24 hours time and talk about the Bad Batch episode directly at that time. But we'll focus on Mando at this point.
Yeah. So we watched it as sort of very, very excitedly. We noticed it did drop early. Sometimes the Star Wars ones drop about 5 minutes early. Sometimes they're bang on time. This one was early. So that was kind of fun. And I took as many notes as I could. I find that there's like a lot to try and absorb in Mando, and I tend to not be able to catch it all. So I've got a recap here. But first, let's jump in and get started on some of these heroics.
Yeah, let's do that. We're on Tatooine at the moment. We're just going to be doing some daily heroic material in the background. Tatooine's a planet we're pretty familiar with because we've got a lot of detail that we're going to want to unpack from that episode. So let's jump in. Where do you want to start?
It's top one, Black Box.
Yep. So, I mean, it's really good to be back and see the cool characters on the main screen. And I love that Greef Karga was a dominant character in this episode, and I love the teasers related to IG-11.
Yes.
Lots and lots of threads started in this episode. I knew it was going to be a slightly shorter episode at 37 minutes, so a little over half an hour really when you cut off the credits and opening and intro. So all along I was feeling like they're opening up all sorts of new threads, and I knew that we weren't going to get any satisfying resolution to them, which is a bit of a shame, but 100% what I expected out of it.
I figured that they weren't really going to be solving too many problems.
No,
that they're just going to basically get stuck straight into it, and not to say that it was predictable, but I wasn't expecting them to give us like a lot of
set things up. I mean, I had no idea at what point they'd choose to start. I've heard some of the rumors online. I'm not going to take too many of them too deeply on board just yet. Some of them will pan out to some degree or another, but I didn't really know where they're going to go, where they're going to pick up relative to Book of Boba Fett material. Jon Favreau's been talking a little bit online recently about the time jumps relative to the last season and the Book of Boba Fett material. We're talking about, he said at one point that Grogu was with Luke for somewhere between 1 and 2 years. So we're actually talking about quite a good few months of time jump and quite a bit of development off screen of all the characters.
Yeah, I think we kind of forget, well, I certainly do, that because Grogu is a child, we're not expecting him to actually sort of look any different or even behave very different over the course of time. So I think that sort of disguised the fact that time was passing,
It did, but we got a lot of clues as to the passage of time based on the progress that Navarro's been making, and the fact that Cara Dune's not there anymore. She's been recruited by Special Forces, and Greef Karga has, I don't know if it's a self-appointed title, High Magistrate rather than just Magistrate.
So there's just a few things that I just had at the top of my notes that I just wanted to point out. This episode, oh golly, I'm getting hurt. What the heck? That was way too many. Way too many. My girl is not geared. I was like, yikes, I got low.
Two mobs at once. Two big mobs. Don't make it up like that. It's quicker.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. But I was totally like looking down at my notes when that happened too, so I didn't even get my defensives on. Woo! Okay. I need to do some gearing on this girl. But anyway. There was like a quick recap at the start, which, as you noticed, sort of included scenes of IG, which kind of gave us a hint. Let's go down to let's see, Jawa trade. So the recap at the start had for things like IG, but it also included scenes from Book of Boba Fett. Not terribly lengthy ones, but I think perhaps to call out to people that may not have realized that there were Mandalorian scenes in that show. Sometimes Disney Plus puts episodes together in a bit of a playlist, and they're like, oh, you know, like they put together like The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror or something like that, or particular playlists on a certain theme or something like that, like Thanksgiving or Christmas episodes from all sorts of genres. And I feel like it was a little bit complicated putting some crucial components of the Mandalorian story within a different series. People wouldn't not necessarily know that those two were so heavily connected. You know, oh look, he's got a new ship, and here's all this stuff going on. You know, the final episode of Mando season 2 ended up with Grogu leaving with Luke, and then suddenly he's like, oh, he's got a new ship and he's back, and all this stuff. Possibly leave people feeling a bit confused. And the recap doesn't necessarily spell out that these are scenes from Book of Boba Fett. I mean, most fans know, but if you're, you know,
well.
We personally know some people that have kind of, you know, been watching Mandalorian, but they're not, you know, really deep in.
It's only going to get worse, I think. And not that it's a bad thing. I mean, we'll manage. So I picked that a bit more to you. But it's only going to get worse with the other content in the Mando timeline and the Mandoverse, the Skeleton Crew and the Ahsoka coming up. And that's an interesting move, considering the extent to which they want to be bringing on new fans. I think, and I mean, I'm sure people can work it out.
I almost think they should. Oh, I picked it up.
We should be almost done.
That they could have done like a special, you know, like a sort of a one-off special to go in between those. You know, like I know that they connected to the storyline. Okay, so now I can pick up the things that did connect, and it made sense, but at the same time they also felt like self-contained, so yeah, all over the place. So I thought that was interesting. This episode was called The Apostate, as that of course in the Book of Boba Fett episodes we saw him sort of re-meet up with the armorer. And she's basically grills him about the fact that he took his helmet off and all that sort of jazz. And now that's kind of his main quest. He did his quest of getting Grogu to the Jedi. Grogu came back. So let's go to supply lines.
One other side note before we go too much deeper. This episode was directed by Rick Famuyiwa, who has directed episodes, you know, in the past. He's slated to direct 3 episodes this season, so I think he's going to be quite. It's going to be quite a story arc that I think he's going to be involved with. So keep an eye out for episodes directed by Famuyiwa in particular. So I think they'll potentially be a little bit more related to the core arc.
So over the sort of starting thing, we hear hammering noises, and I was like, ooh, and sure enough, we start off with the armorer. I was hoping that we'd get to see, she appears in some of the sort of the advertising, the promotional campaign for season 3. So I was like, that's pretty good odds we'll see her. So that was kind of fun seeing her straight off the bat. We see her sort of working in a new forge in a cave, hammering away, seeing her sort of melting and shaping and cutting, and we see her creating a smaller Mandalorian helmet, which is kind of fun. She exits the cave, and we see a whole lot of Mandalorians all gathered to basically induct a new young member to the clan, which is kind of interesting because this also gives us. At first, I was like, "Wow, that's a lot of Mandos," and as I was thinking about it, I'm like, "Okay, this is showing the passage of time." In the Book of Boba Fett episodes, we saw it was basically Paz Vizsla and the Armorer that were basically left since their last sort of conclave was decimated on Navarro. And here we see a lot of them all lined up. So we know that they've either sort of welcomed other Mandos into their specific clan, basically like, hey, come and follow our set of rules and join our clan, or they have found others of sort of the Watch.
There was a mix, this definite mix of adult and younger child Mandalorians, as well as the one that was getting his new helmet. There were others wearing that style of helmet, which looks a lot more akin to the cheaper Hasbro toy helmets with a slightly wider visor so the kids can see more readily out of them.
To me, it's sort of, I also thought, I mean, this is just coming from like a fan perspective, a costuming perspective, it opens up the door for a very easy kid cosplay. Because the kid doesn't have any other armor. It's just a helmet, which makes that kind of fun. So you could be like, oh, look, you're like a new member of the Mandalorians, you know, you've taken the oath. And I thought that was cute, you know, because we know that the Mandalorian has sort of fandom that spans generations, which is kind of fun, you know, families really watching it. And so we see the young Mando taking the oath in front of the others. Sorry, I'm just like looking at my notes while I'm trying to shoot at the same time. The numbers have grown a lot. We see Paz Vizsla there, so he hasn't gotten lost or anything like that. He's still with them.
No one else immediately recognizable.
Yeah. not
that we're expecting that, because we don't know a lot other than Costco and X.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go in here and bust some boxes. And just before the young Mandalorian can sort of finish his oath, the armorer sort of senses something and interrupts him. And then there's like a giant sort of alligator turtle, as it were, with a big sort of armored back, comes to jump, like sort of rushing out of the water at them and sort of attacks all the Mandalorians. And we see this kind of skirmish. We see one Mandalorian meet his fate.
No clues as to what planet this was, I don't think.
No, it's...
But it does seem to tie into the theme that, Din Djarin's looking for redemption by seeking the living waters under the mines on Mandalore. They've chosen a spot that I guess is reminiscent of some aspects of Mandalore, access to water, proximity to water.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that just before, at the end, she like seemingly sort of going to offer like a bowl of water or something. I don't know if he's going to drink or anything like that, because he just put his helmet on and he's not supposed to take it off.
No. I'm specifically thinking that somebody might get... So it's thinking about the impracticality of administering medical aid during a battle to someone who can't take their helmet off. I mean, as we saw with Din and IG-11 way back in season 1, but I was almost expecting somebody to get hurt in a way where having a helmet would actually be a hindrance. Yeah.
Having just recently done a bit of a rewatch of Mandalorian episodes, there were elements of the Crate Dragon fight that this one reminded me of. Sort of all kind of, a very big beast, all trying to sort of using explosives and the weapons that they have to not the most great effect because it is very big. Let's go do prison labor. And we sort of see a few of them try to plant explosives on it, and it's kind of swishing around. And it's quite a convincing fight. I know it's a giant CG creature, but it really does look like a whole lot of Mandalorians fighting on the beach. Sand and water is hard to do in a CG way without it sort of looking really messy.
There's people wearing armor underwater.
Yeah.
David's just joined the chat. Hey, David. We started a shade late because we actually watched it twice before we jumped in here, so you haven't missed too much. We're only just talking about the fight on the Mandalorian beach at this point.
Yeah, it's hard to watch and take notes at the same time because I knew that there'd be a lot that I wanted to like remember. There's a lot to absorb in these episodes, lots of little details. So yeah, she's just gotten up to the part with the big sort of crocodile turtle fight.
And just saying in general, it's really cool to have live action material back. Lots going on in this episode, and lots of threads started, and we're just going to work our way through those. I don't know, it was really cool. I mean, right from the get-go, that notion that we might see IG again, that was the main thrust. So yeah, Mando turns up to save the day in terms of the crocodile fight.
I thought it was interesting because we see everybody on the beach, and you know, Heavy Met, Paz Vizsla's got his big artillery, and everyone else has got all their weapons and stuff like that. And we see the armor. To be sure, she was sort of running the ceremony, but she just has her sort of forged weapons. I've yet to see her depicted with any kind of actual classic weapon. You know, there's no blasters or anything like that. She tends to use her forging weapons, her forging tools, as kind of like staff weapons, blunt weapons, which is kind of interesting. And we see her sort of rescuing one of the Mandos that's kind of been knocked under the water and stuff like that. And then, yeah, as you say, when it looks like they're potentially struggling. Okay, blood and sand. Then, of course, Din Djarin flies in his new N1 fighter and basically kills it from the sky, you know, saving the day, as it were.
Yeah, so what follows from that is he has a private conversation with the armorer where they just reiterate some of the material that was covered in Book of Boba Fett, I think. You know, that sort of exposition, I think, did help.
Get the feeling she's not terribly fond of him. She reminds him, she's like, you voluntarily removed your helmet. You know, you're shamed.
Surprising almost that she allowed the audience to that extent.
Yeah.
I would have thought almost that she would want to have little to do with him. But
yeah.
He presents evidence that people have been to Mandalore, even though that was devastated by the Empire.
I thought it was kind of interesting because immediately I'm like, oh, we didn't see him do that. So he produces like what he calls like a Mandalorian inscription, and it looks like a green crystal. And when the armorer holds it from Jawas, who got it from a traveler who claimed to have gotten it from Mandalore. So it's kind of like, you know, word of mouth. You got to trust the Jawas on their word that that's where this came from. And it looks like a green crystal with a piece of sort of stone, engraved stone, and we can see text sort of engraved on it.
I think the crystal might be relating to the fact that they nuked the place to glass.
Yeah, because Boba Fett references that at the end of Mandalorian Season 2. They're basically like it was bombed to glass. Of course, sort of, I guess, referencing, you know, what happens with sort of heat and sand and all that sort of stuff, which I thought was interesting. And he basically points out that if a traveler was able to retrieve it from the surface, then that means that you can actually go to the planet. And and he reiterates that if I can go there and prove that I was in the water, in the mines, then that must mean that I can be redeemed and I would be back. And then she basically just looks at him for a bit and then goes, this is the way. We'll make our way towards the boss.
That is what Preed states. She can't argue with that.
She can't argue. You can see she's kind of like no, but like she wants to argue, or basically like shoot him down.
No, I don't think so. Well,
it's hard to read a face that's not a face, but she just kind of looks at him. Yeah, she knows that she can't argue because that is.
Doubts that he can do it because.
I think
if he can, then there's no reason for it not to be valid.
Yeah. And then we see a fun little, a very sort of teasery sequence of them flying in hyperspace. We see Din is asleep and Grogu's in his little bubble watching the hyperspace sort of lights, as it were. I don't know really how to describe hyperspace other than lights going by. And when he looks longer, we can see what appear to be creatures. And my first, I just about screamed out, I was like, space whales. Because that's what they look like, the creatures.
Yeah, it just seems natural to call them that. They are, of course, the Purgil, which were introduced in Rebels. So they are large space-faring creatures that are able to travel in hyperspace.
Which I don't know if that's like a big nod to
I don't know, I think
to
it might
the
be
Ahsoka series or to something
exactly.
that's coming
I
up.
think it's more than a nod. I think it is a tease because Ezra had a specific relationship with them, and they helped in the battle against Thrawn and Rebels.
Yeah.
But his specific connection to them, I think they're going to show up in live action again, and potentially in the Ahsoka series in terms of explaining something.
Because I know that to anybody like that hasn't watched all the animation would just have no clue what that meant. But that felt like a really cool Easter egg for everyone, all the sort of fans that have watched all the animation. They go, here's a little sneak peek for you guys to get excited about. Which was very excited. And then we have this cute little moment where Grogu sort of climbs down out of the little cockpit bubble and sort of gets onto Din Djarin's lap. We can see that Din has been asleep and he just kind of curls up on his lap, which I thought was really cute.
It just as a side note, I really quite like this notion of creatures or organic beings in general, sentient beings, whatever, that can navigate or travel through hyperspace just naturally without the use of technology. And it crops up in other science fiction, the likes of Navigators and Chronicles of Riddick and in Dune.
It also made me think of the creature at the Moor in Solo. Yeah. It is an organic being that's like living in space and stuff like that. Because it has like a skull and flesh and stuff like that when it sort of gets too close. Which I thought was sort of kind of cool. We don't know, at least it's not immediately evident what that planet is or what the creature is. I really wish that they had visual dictionaries for this series. Honestly, there are so many little details. Hopefully there'll be something online and, Favreau will go, it said this thing and they were on this planet, so we can fill in some gaps for those of us that are curious. But then after traveling through hyperspace, Grogu and the Mandalorian arrive at Navarro, which looks different. And this is another indicator of how much time has gone by.
So it's much more bustling, much more happy and relaxed for the citizens.
Well, we see like trees. It looks sunny. It looks lighter.
There's markets. People are out on the streets.
There's a band playing. Some of the bits that I wrote down. It looks a lot better. Sunny, lively. Trees. A band performing, complete with Twi'leks. We see a cook droid. A Mon Calamari is seen quite prominently. Let's go down to call down the thunder. We see monkey lizards in a tree.
Yep, there was an EV droid in the background at one point. Makes, of course.
We see I think it was white or grey protocol droid, sort of very classic looking, walking by. And then of course we come up to the statue of IG-11 in the town square, which I was like, cool, because they did, include that reference, and I'm like, I wonder if they're just gonna do a little nod to him, or whether this will be further on, and as we'll get to that where we do. It wasn't just a tiny little nod. So then we see Hive Magistrate Grief Karga as he corrects people. He's looking very fancy.
He's fully embellished his get-up as a parable over. He's got two little droids literally carrying the train of his cape.
I thought that was such a fun little detail. He didn't sort of call attention to it very much, but I thought that was a super fun little detail.
And we go to his office, he's got a big bust of himself.
Yes. And we see the clip that, whether you watched it online or not, they put a small segment of the episode up online, and this is where this one fits in. Mandalorian and Grief Karga talking in Grief Karga's office, and Grogu is basically using the Force to spin around in the chair and grab some food to eat off the desk. And we can see Grief Karga is desperately trying to get Din Djarin to basically hey, come and live here, because you did your quest and you've got nothing else to do. Because as they're walking through the street, or no, it's later. Sorry, I'm just not fighting here. He tries to get Din Djarin to settle down by land by the hot springs. He tells Grief Karga about completing his quest, removing his helmet, and now he's got to basically redeem himself. But while they're talking about this, the shiny protocol droid interrupts and says there are pirates in the courtyard. And so they go outside, and we see a sort of a classic gang of like all the classic sort of bad guy Star Wars aliens. We have Quarren, Nikto, Klatooinian, Weequay, and Trandoshan. Like all the sort of classic. Yeah.
Well, most of the Jedi, apart from the Trandoshan.
Which is kind of fun. There is a reference to the Pirate King. They're demanding a drink at what used to be, I guess, the bar. Because we saw that in one of the other references when he went back and he's like, it's a school now instead of a bar.
Yeah.
And this pirate gang wants to go back in because they're like, basically, you know, it's hours and stuff. And he's like, no, it's a school. You can't go in. And there's a tense sort of very cowboy-esque standoff, you know, showing your blasters in your holster and stuff like that. And Grief Karga showing off his skills. He actually does manage to draw first and wound... not wound, but disarm, taking the blaster out of the other guy's hand. And then I think it is, he says something like Navarro is no longer friendly to pirates. And it looks like maybe some of the pirates will make a move and Din Djarin basically just blasts all of them except for what looks to be like the head pirate, the one that was doing most of the talking anyway.
Yeah.
It's perhaps a little bit overkill, but, you know, he's, like, not taking any chances, providing a bit of muscle, helping his friend out, yeah. And then they talk about the fact that he needs a marshal, and he's like, what about Cara Dune? And this is where we quickly sort of sum up what would have happened in the in-between. Says when she returned with Gideon, she was recruited for special forces, so he doesn't have... So that basically very quickly explains where she is and that she's not going to be here anymore, and that he's in need of, you know, somebody to help sort of police. You know, he's more like a politician. He's got some skills, but he needs somebody to be actual muscle. And he also mentions that Gideon was sent off to a New Republic war tribunal. So this doesn't necessarily tell us exactly...
No. It doesn't say what the outcome of the tribunal was.
No. We don't know if it has been decided. We don't know if it's like still going on. We don't know if he's imprisoned. And we certainly don't know if he escaped. Because I don't think that's going to be the last of what we see of Moff Gideon. I think he's too cool. I think he's too important. Especially because he ties in with the Empire's plans for Grogu. And I don't think that storyline's done yet. So whether or not he was found guilty of a trial or something, I'm like, nah, somebody will break him out, stormtroopers or something, or he'll just have connections and get out.
That'll be kind of interesting, actually.
Yeah.
He does break out. Kind of quite a bit of a story there, I think.
I mean, it could be entirely possible that he has insider sort of saboteurs or whatever within the New Republic, and basically
I wonder if we'll have to go to them for some assistance of some sort. That's not an uncommon thread.
Yeah, which could be fun. And Din Djarin's basically like, well, why don't you just ask the New Republic for some muscle? And he's like, no, I want to be independent. Which is, you know, reasonable.
Good explanations on the whole, like that kind of gels.
And he reminds Grief that he can't stay. And he's like, well, how can I help you? And he basically points to the IG-11 statue and is like, I want him back. Which was something I did not see coming, to be honest. Like, you know, personally, we both really like the character, but I wasn't exactly sure how they would figure out to, like, do anything with him. And it's at this point we can kind of, like, taking a little bit of a closer look. We see that some of the statue looks like IG himself, and some of it looks like sort of a standard sort of copper statue. We'll just go around the corner and do that one. And then we can kind of see he wants him because he wants basically a droid to help him safely explore Mandalore. And I guess he's thinking back to the fact that IG was basically willing to just sort of sacrifice himself to protect Grogu. He was sort of rewired with the help of Quill.
And as soon as he said that, my mind was just going off the net. We're going to have Adventures of Din Djarin and IG-11, which suits me just fine.
Yeah. So we have a sort of a rebuilding sequence where he's basically sort of trying to rewire him and fix him and stuff like that. And we see the sort of classic, tiny signs of life, the hand twitching, the head moving, and then the lights in his eyes, sort of droid eyes, sort of turning on. And then white here.
If they might have done this for consistency, I just didn't notice it. When he was a nurse droid in the latter episodes of the other seasons, did he have white eyes as a nurse droid as distinct from the red eyes as a bounty hunter?
Yeah,
that's kind of what they're implying here, but I hadn't noticed that.
No, I hadn't noticed that either. I know, yeah, it's one of those funny little things. And then, yeah, he sees, because Grogu's obviously on the table next to him, and when he sees Grogu, unfortunately, what we know as his original programming as an assassin droid, and he starts talking about like the asset must be terminated, and does this really creepy sort of Terminator Walking Dead-esque crawl around on the ground because he hasn't got legs, desperately trying to get Grogu.
Awesome.
What's that?
That was awesome.
It was really fast, and it was quite scary. It was like really sort of dramatic, creepy music and stuff like that. And he kind of grabs onto Din Djarin's leg, who he sort of like tosses Grogu to grief to make IG, and he's kind of shooting at him. But then it's sort of an unexpected end to it. The protocol droid that had been hiding in the corner basically knocks over a giant, well, life size, I guess, bust of Greek Karga onto the remains of IG, which stops him in his tracks.
Dave in chat just had green trying to scare you when you beat it up.
Yeah. But that doesn't seem to necessarily deter him, which is kind of interesting. That even though he's like, the very first thing he did when he booted up was try to kill Grogu, this doesn't seem to deter him from wanting to fix him. So they take him to a droid smith, and we see a tiny door. Just before we keep going, let's find something else to do. I'm just going to run outside the door.
If you think of Zootopia, where you have doors and buildings of all different sizes.
Yeah.
Different species.
Yeah. Let's do Voss, because we can run that one pretty easily. And then, of course, as soon as we see the tiny door combined with the words droidsmith, we realize it is the, forgive me, I don't recall the species name, though they do say it on screen. It's basically basically Babu Frick species, which I thought was really cool. And this time we see like multiples of them, all wearing similar outfits with goggles and tools and stuff like that. They all look like puppets. Which I think is fun. I think it's quite funny seeing, kind of gave me like Luke in Yoda's hut vibes. We see Mando sitting cross-legged in like the little short room. And Greef Karga sort of like talking to him from outside, talking through the door. And in their sort of Babu Frick speech, they say that he's basically broken and that his memory circuits, I can't remember the exact thing, is broken and that they can't fix it, and he's like, can you reboot him without it? And he said he needs a new one.
Yeah. And I don't know at that point if Din Djarin's just desperate or he does truly know where he might get one.
Yeah.
He seems fairly confident. Or at least, persistent.
It's alright, I'm coming. Okay.
But anyway, he decides that's what he's going to do.
Yeah. And at the end of the sequence, because we can see that Grogu's been looking at these guys with sort of like curiosity, he tries to pick one of them up because obviously he's a child, but he's actually bigger than they are, which is kind of funny. He just seems to want to give them a hug. It's kind of funny. He's just sort of picking them up and they're not sure what he's doing. I
thought it was kind of funny because Grogu's been played up so much as Baby Yoda, and as a toy, and as a tiny companion, and to sort of think of him having a tiny friend as turning of the tables.
Yeah. And then so we see that he decides to leave to go find. He decides that this is the next thing that he has to do: go find a memory chip to be able to rebuild AG. So we see them leave in his M1 Starfighter, and he's got Grogu on his lap, talking to him about there's more to being a Mandalorian than fighting, and he's talking about navigating the galaxy, and is kind of showing him controls on the ship. And then almost on cue, I mean, obviously as written, the, what is it they call it? The enemy proximity warning indicator. And we see that the one remaining pirate that they let escape has decided to join up with his buddies and go, you killed 4 of my friends, I'm gonna, you can't get away with that. And then we have a sort of a space chase scene that is very much like the space battle at the end of episode 1 combined with the asteroid chase of episode 2. Because you've got the N1 fighter, and we've got a very obvious callback to the spinning. But then we have the same sort of Obi-Wan asteroid sort of maneuvering without seismic charges. But he does do some cool moves. He goes in behind. I thought that was kind of fun where they're like, where did he go? And then you see one of them fly behind an asteroid and just get obliterated. So he's obviously very good with flying, because we haven't seen him, like he did some sort of dog fighting style fighting with the Razor Crest, but we know that the N1 is very fast, and we're sort of seeing it right out of the bat in the first episode, which I thought was fun, because I wasn't sure if we were going to get like an action-packed sort of end sequence to this episode, or whether it was sort of going to trail off and give us a few threads. So that was kind of fun that they like fit a little bit more action in there. And then we see them sort of dog fighting through the asteroids. We see a mining station on one of them, because Grief Karga referenced the asteroid miners. And basically called out on the radio something like, I'm bringing the Mandalorian to you, Captain. And then just as he finished saying that, we realized that he has been flying towards a very big striped pirate ship. And we are introduced to, I wrote it down, Gorian Shard. I think it was Shard. Which is an interesting looking species. I don't immediately recognize it. It's kind of like green. Gave me sort of like a Davy Jones Pirates of the Caribbean vibe, just with like leaves, rather than sort of like the barnacles and seaweed of some of those pirates that we see, which I thought was interesting. I hope we get some more information about him.
It would seem weird that they introduce him to that level and don't use him again.
Yeah.
Felt that like that was intentional.
Yeah, I get the feeling we'll run into him again. And the Mandalorian tells Grogu never trust a pirate, and they jump to hyperspace because they're not just going to really stick around and see what he's got there. And then we have like just when I think that might be where it wrapped up, because I can never keep track of the time when watching these things. The time always goes by kind of slow and then like too fast. So we've done that one. I'm going to go to Cleanse the Corrupted. We see him going to he says the words Kalamala, and I'm not sure how that is spelled or said properly. That's what it sounded like to me. I'm going to have to do a bit of looking up, because he mentions that it is a planet in the Mandalorian system. And he is going to what he calls a Mandalorian castle, which we see.
That totally looked like an aerial shot of somewhere on Earth.
But it looks kind of sad, abandoned, a bit desolate. It's very sort of stone. Doesn't look warm, doesn't look busy. There's only a droid on the outside.
And it rains all the time. Yeah,
a lot of water. So watery raining. There's one droid by the landing platform. He walks up towards the main building. Big stone. Don't know really what it would be made out of. Archways. And then we see some of the shots that we saw in the trailer, if you watched the trailer. Bo-Katan sitting on sort of a stone throne, just by herself, no one else around. And here we kind of really get a sense of what has happened, the ramifications of what went down regarding the Darksaber at the end of season 2, because obviously that was the main thread towards the end of The Mandalorian. We kind of had all these adventures with Luke and Ahsoka and Grogu in those Book of Boba Fett episodes, and now this is kind of pulling us all the way back to what the end of the actual Mandalorian season 2 was all about tying in the sort of complexity of the Darksabers. And I have here, he basically says, hey, Bo-Katan, I'm here to join you. And she says, there's nothing left to join. Her forces melted away when she returned without the Darksaber. They left with the stolen fleet, and they're now working as mercenaries.
Yeah, and so this is really kind of grim. It kind of tells us that the Mandalorians are not only fragmented, they have very little hope left. They're just off working for cash rather than honor or
because they almost seem, having watched the previous episodes, when Mandalorian goes up to them, I can't remember what planet they're on, and they're like, not all Mandalorians are mercenaries, you know. They almost take it like, you know, how dare you assume that about us, you know, we're above that.
Beneath them, yeah.
Yeah. They don't seem to like having that assumption made about them, and then we find out that, oh yeah, that is essentially what they've done, because they thought that they were going to be banding, you know, behind Bo-Katan and, you know, sort of reclaiming everything, and nope, that's all sort of fallen apart. She asks if he still has it, because we saw him use it in the Book of Boba Fett episodes, but I suddenly realized at that point I hadn't actually remembered that he still has it. Because we don't see him use it. It's not like, at least I don't notice it like on his belt. I think I would have noticed it, but to be honest, I'd have to go back and see. Doesn't appear like he certainly doesn't pull it out and use it or any instance, because yeah. And he's basically sort of like, aren't you gonna like do anything? He seems like surprised that she's kind of just given up. And then she kind of, I don't know, this is a very cynical take, basically pointing out that his cult of the Watch abandoned, and says, your cult gave up on Mandalore before the Purge. Go home, there's nothing left. She essentially calls him a fool, that there is nothing magic about the mines of Mandalore. They gave Beskar ore to our ancestors and nothing more, that there wasn't anything sort of magical about it in terms of like honor, or that it's just a superstition. But she does give him directions to where the mines are, under the civic center in the city of Sendari. And he's basically like, I'm going to go have a look and see if they're really poisoned. And that's essentially where it ends. So we've kind of got, I'm not, you know, don't have any indication at this point if it's going to be the main story arc that's going to go all the way to the end. We don't know if this is basically going to be season 3 getting his honor back, or whether this is just something to sort of kick off something larger about Mandalore. We know that he has the Darksaber that he won in combat.
No idea how it's going to happen, but I kind of feel like the unification of the Mandalorians has got to be an end point that we're working towards at some level. Because it just seems kind of weird, and I guess it's not an uncommon theme in Star Wars for people to be, you know, exist in despair.
Well, it's also just a bit sad, because we are watching a show about a Mandalorian, and then sort of like his people are all lost and sad, and it's just kind of like, yeah, it's a little bit different. I'll go to Rock Eaters. And the other note that I wrote is that Grogu does not appear to be wearing his little Beskar shirt. That was a sort of a featured gift in the episodes from the Mandalorian.
Yeah, certainly not visible.
I thought that if he was going to be wearing it, it would be like visible. But to my eyes, I couldn't spot it.
No.
Nor is he wearing anything else that's different. We know that he has like the necklace at some point. He doesn't wear that. His hoverpod looks new, different.
I think
couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it looked a little different to me. And I'm just like, my eyes are just getting old. It didn't look familiar. Still the same sort of shape, but it just looked a little different.
Well, the last one he had was the one that Quill made, and I think it was kind of heavy armored. if I remember correctly, and something didn't happen subsequent to that. This one looked a little bit more refined, had quite
It's a
cushion,
little bit more zippy.
had
A
more of
little bit
seat
more like
inside
a it's looking a little bit more like a tiny speeder than a crib.
Yeah, and I think it had a seat rather than a bed inside it.
Yeah.
It had little headlights on the lower casing.
Yeah. It looks more like something that he would sort of ride around in. Like Yoda has like his little hover seat that he uses inside the Jedi Temple.
Yeah.
This one's kind of like a little bit more enclosed, so it could armor him up, but it's not like a little sort of bassinet type crib or something. That's the vibe that I had from it.
I think so too. I don't know if I was imagining it. He seemed a little bit more, I don't know.
He felt more alert. Just with the expressions, and I know that's like, it's a rubber puppet, it's hard to, you can't exactly read expressions into it much, but...
That's what went through my mind. I was wondering if that was an intentional portrayal of him being a bit more mature, or if they had literally just advanced the animatronics of the puppets in a way that made him a little bit more animated.
Yeah. But
or both.
It felt intentional.
Yeah.
Because he seemed to be... Yeah. Suddenly, like, spinning himself around on a chair. It just felt like he was a little bit older. Still playful. He's still a kid, but there was something about that. He's certainly got a little bit more of a handle on his Force abilities. And the trailer indicates that as well, without getting too much into that in case you don't want to watch the trailers. But I thought it was good. You know, we very quickly addressed what happened, because when we finished at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian, we had Bo-Katan, Cosca Reeves, Cara Dune, Fennec Shand, Moff Gideon, and Din Djarin all together on that bridge. And obviously there's been a period of time. We know where Fennec is because of the Book of Boba Fett. We know where she would end up going. And we find out where Boba Fett is. Bo-Katan. And we find out, sadly, that her sort of teammates that we see of Cosca Reeves and Axe Woves don't seem to be with her, which is kind of sad. At least we find out later that they are like the only two that have stayed loyal by her side, but they're certainly not depicted in that scene. It is implied that she's basically by herself. That perhaps they were only following her because they expected her to get the Darksaber, and they basically wanted to be like on her right hand, sort of, you know, of the ruler of Mandalore.
Maybe she's just a bit gloomy and not fun to be around.
Yeah. She's basically given up.
It sounded like she pushed people away when she gave up in the absence of the Darksaber. So it was a good episode. It opened lots and lots of threads. I mean, we've watched almost season 1, all of season 1 and season 2. Nothing compares to the first episode of season 1. It was just so good to watch again. So there wasn't anything quite as impactful as that. But those sort of like shocking gasp moments. There were lots of like, oh, that's going to be interesting. Lots of little threads. But I don't think if you base a show on just shocking gasps all the time, then you just end up doing things for the gimmick, not because it's actually helpful or good storytelling. And I appreciate that. The first one, you know, like, because we had no idea what The Mandalorian could go, of course they were going to put something cool to sort of hook you in the show. But I've got to say, like, you know, like, it felt expected, but then I didn't really know, like, I guess because I'd watched the trailer a few times, I was like, okay, so I think they're going to touch on this and this and that. And I liked that. And it was a good episode. There's more action in it that I thought we might get for the first episode. I thought there might be a little bit of necessary exposition. You know, this is what's been going on, and now we've got to do all of these things, and I'm going to talk about it so you all know. Because Mandalorian is a quiet character. It doesn't work for him to be doing like a whole lot of exposition. You know, there were certain... He does explain things to Grogu every now and then. Just for the sake of it up and...
But he's not a chatty character, you know. No. We see scenes where other people talk more than he does. We have scenes with Grief Karga. Grief Karga does a lot of filling in because Grief Karga is
Yeah.
a very chatty, charismatic person, so he does a lot.
Actually, yeah,
He does a lot
did
of like
say
his Cara
we
Dune
take
and
it
Moff
down.
Gideon and I need a
Exactly. We
marshal.
need to take it down. There was a lot of that, which is fine.
Yeah.
I'm just jumping around, but I'm really glad that Din hasn't given up on preparing IG. That may take a little while, but I'm looking forward to seeing the outcome of that.
Yeah. And yeah, seeing Taika in the credits as the voice, as we would hope. But yeah, having sort of like a sidekick, as it were, because if we are to believe, as he would, that there's basically, like, I'm curious to, like, I guess he is assuming, I don't know, because he's like, maybe it isn't poisoned, but then he wants a droid for protection, and I'm like, what is he expecting there to be on the planet that he might need a droid? I mean, he wouldn't need a former assassin droid for simply navigating. Is he expecting beasts? Is he expecting pirates or people sort of looting and pillaging? I thought that was interesting. He just sort of like wants to be prepared.
He's got someone watching his back and watching Grogu. It does free him up just a shade.
Yeah.
It's a little bit limiting, which
it has to be the Grogu aspect, why he specifically wants IG. Otherwise, he could just go get a very good droid that's good with a blaster. But he knows that IG basically gave himself up to defend Grogu. That was his sort of primary objective at that point, was to protect him. Which, yeah, if you're going into dangerous territory and you've got a very skilled droid willing to just do anything to protect Grogu, then I can see why. But still not sure what dangers he expects to encounter. Because I really can't wait till he gets to that point. We've obviously got this kind of little side quest. He's got to fix IG first. So we could have a couple of episodes, one, maybe more, if I'm running around. Does he know specifically where he can get this chip from? Or is he just going to have to sort of like go to a few friends and some contacts and get it? And,
yeah,
you know,
be a little bit more
and like, and it might be like the first episode of season 2 where he's like, hey, I want Boba Fett's armor back from Cobb Vanth, and he's like, sure, I'll give it to you, but you do this thing for me. There could be a sort of a side adventure like that. Hey, here's an IG memory chip, but hey, can you help me with this thing? And he's like, yeah, sure, that's a fair trade. We'll probably get something like that, I'm assuming, you know, something interesting. I'm gonna ding out on my conquests. But I do enjoy those side quests. I know that not everything has to be singular. Sorry, just trying to get through the cutscene. And I'm really keen to get to Mandalore, because you know that they're going to give it to us. They're not going to tease that and then not.
Oh, and then there's the unspoken threads we haven't encountered yet, like Moff Gideon.
Yeah.
It's got a reference. I don't know. They could just park them for now, but it feels like we're going to see him. I'm pretty sure I've heard Giancarlo Esposito talking about the future of Moff Gideon to some extent, not in detail, not in spoilery detail, but.
Because one of the things that I noticed rewatching, excuse me, the most recent episode of the season of Mandalorian was the scientist, the cloning expert. Yep. They capture the shuttle that he is on, and then they use that shuttle to board Gideon's ship. Now, from once they capture the shuttle, we don't see him again. He's not referenced. He doesn't seem to be on Boba Fett's ship. Or the shuttle that they used to board. Sorry, I'm going to go to my house just to get out of here quickly. And they don't seem to reference him again. We get Moff Gideon referencing the fact that he got the sort of the special blood that he wanted out of Grogu. And we know that the Doctor is a cloning expert, but we don't see him again. We assume that they've got him captive somewhere. But I want to see where that goes, because that's still this underlying thread of what did the Empire really, like spell it out for us. We know it's something to do with his blood, something to do with the fact that he's force sensitive. Sorry, I'm running around on my house. Do you want to do CZ real quick?
Yep, I'm also in my stronghold. I'm just dumping a few things. Let's see
Okay.
what I don't need. Don't need that. Yep, make sure it's easier than 10 seconds.
So that's one of the sort of the main threads that we didn't, at least that jumps to mind, that we didn't see them touch on in this episode. And I know that we can't cram like every little thing, and they're like, okay, so here's what's happening in this storyline. This is, going to tell you what's going on with this one. Because the show always does tend to follow Din Djarin himself more closely. We do get scenes from other people's perspectives that Din would not be privy to. We see things from Moff Gideon's perspective and things like that. Not a lot, but enough. It's not just from Din's perspective. So I'm curious whether we'll get whether our first connection with some of the other characters will be from their perspective and what's going on. And I kind of want to go back and watch the trailers and go, okay, so we saw that. Ooh, that's right. There was that thing that we haven't seen yet. But at the same time, I like trailers, but then sometimes I kind of want to forget what's in the trailer as I watch the show. So I'm not waiting for something to show up and just enjoying the show and the pacing for what it is, rather than just going, oh, when is this shot going to show up? I do kind of wish it was a double episode for the first one, but we did essentially get a double episode of Star Wars because we've got both Mandalorian and Bad Batch. And I think if they gave us two, then that would just be a lot all in one night at midnight for Americans.
That is quite possibly why. Out of the reason why, at least.
Yeah. And it did seem to finish it nice. It wasn't didn't feel like a cliffhanger. It felt like a natural stopping point. That he's now got sort of the short quest to go do. I hope that we see Peli Motto again. Because she seems to be a good, certainly for Starship parts. We don't know if she would be a go-to for droid parts. Who knows? That'd be kind of fun. We know that she works with droids. She's got the pit droids with her. And R5-D4, apparently. So who knows? Maybe that'll be his first port of call. It'll be like, hey, do you know where I can get one of these? Which I think would be just so cool.
Well, that just made me laugh. It's not an in-world explanation, but all of the cantinas on places like Tatooine have IG-88 heads as set decorations.
Yeah.
Hey. Full of, chips.
Yeah, that would be funny. But yeah. I think it was I hope they don't take too long to resolve the IG. So we're going to have him back. Yeah. What was your favorite moment? If you can isolate it, having only watched it twice.
As much as I like quite a lot. I like Cal Weathers and I like Grief Karga. I know he's over the top, but I still think it works. I like to do little bits and pieces, like when he first heard Grogu's name.
Yeah.
Say what? But I liked, as creepy as it was, I liked seeing IG crawling around the floor. I thought it was...
Well, it kind of reminded me just of how lethal he was, because to be honest, it had been a while since we'd seen that very first episode where he just takes out that whole area of bounty hunters, mobsters, what do you call them? Sort of at the very start when they're teaming up to go retrieve the asset, as it were. And he just takes them all on. Oh, that was me. Sorry, I shot somebody over there.
I'll try another there. Yeah, let's do.
Here we go. Because they're supposed to be sinister and you know, IG is supposed to be up there with the likes of, you know, Bosk and Boba Fett and stuff like that. It was, that they're sort of, you know, they have a reputation for being very efficient assassins. And I think it's fun. I just really like the way that there's like such a fun mix of sort of familiar things in The Mandalorian. But you know, it's in this kind of new sort of era. So things feel familiar. There's like an interesting mix of things from the prequels and the original trilogy. Seeing the way I noticed in the Starfighter, they kind of did a lot of focusing on his hand controls and the viewport, which felt like they were very much tying that into shots specifically from Phantom Menace when Anakin is flying the N1 around during the Battle of Naboo.
Yeah, it almost felt like I was speaking to the versatility and maneuverability. I was just thinking about the actual hand controls and how fast they are to react. It sort of gives it a feel of a very agile craft.
And we saw him sort of giving an example of the firepower, taking out the creature at the start.
Yeah.
We could see it sort of taking out something that the Mandalorians, just their handheld weaponry was not capable of damaging. It had a very hard shell. It's interesting to see the Mandalorians on a new planet. They didn't seem to have a building.
No,
so we don't know if this is like they found basically an uninhabited planet to hide out.
Trying to stay completely off the radar.
Well, yeah, because you know, they were chanting basically like, you know, we hide, only one of us can go above ground, this is the way. And we don't know whether basically being found out on Navarro and wiped out has only sort of reinforced that belief. So they're like, okay, not even on inhabited planets now, we're just going to find ones with nasty beasts and just lots of jungle or something. Obviously, Din is in enough contact with them to know where they are, because they didn't look exactly like a findable place.
Yeah, that's true.
You wouldn't just be like, hey, look, there's like a whole lot of water and some caves. That'll be where my friends are.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Touch on that. I wouldn't have thought
because the last time
Christmas card list or anything.
Yeah, the last time he was talking to the armorer, they were on a city planet. Huh?
Yeah, no, sorry, I said Bo-Katan, I meant the armorer.
Yeah, it was like it kind of gave me like what I can think of. It kind of made me think of like Meksha versus like Nashadar or something like that.
Very industrial.
Yeah, where they can sort of hide, they can do jobs, they can earn money. This one, they're just like in the middle of nowhere, you know, like places, you know, money is of no use.
They can't be completely hidden if they're recruiting and saving or rescuing people.
They must have a way of getting off world, doing something, or perhaps it's in the wilderness and there's like a city or at least a township, you know, some distance away on the same planet. I kind of hope we get more information there. Because he's very keen to rejoin their ranks, and I'm like, they are living in caves. I'm sure you could do better. Obviously, it's more about honor to him, but which makes you wonder whether that might be the end of seeing him without his helmet off. If they're going to basically really point out how much they're like, oh, he's going to all this trouble because he took his helmet off. I mean, from a technical standpoint, it was twice. Though I don't know if they necessarily count. You know, anything more than once is enough. And they're like, nope, you do it once, that's enough. And he did it twice by choice.
Well, if you don't count IG, then it was twice, because it was once with Migs.
Yeah.
And it was once at the end with Grogu at the end of.
Which will be the two that he's basically having to atone for. And I'm
So
I don't know how they could possibly write in another, unless it's like we get some scenes of him just entirely on his own. I can't see how they could give us as the audience another excuse to see him. You know, he'd go through all of this trouble, and now I take my helmet off again. You know, it's just like that's not going to make any sense.
He's happy to have IG as a partner.
Yeah, because he knows, he's like, hey, I can like chat to you and eat food, and I can have my helmet off.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to my house. So I think that's about as much as we can sort of talk about. I felt like at least I hit all the points that I remember as being standout to me. And I feel like if I think back and try and divide it a little bit more, I'm just going to end up just speculating a lot on where this is going to go.
Well, we need to stream again to cover Bad Batch, and we will watch Mando again before that time, I'm sure. So even though the next stream we do within the next 24 hours we'll be focusing on Bad Batch, I'm sure a little bit of Mando will creep in, and I'm sure that'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, because we'll have time to sort of, I guess, soak it in a little bit more.
Yep.
Like, I really like jumping in and sort of going through the episodes, like, while it's all fresh, but at the same time, some of your more sort of insightful observations come after more reflection. But yeah, I think it's super fun that it's back, because, oh my gosh, I was like, it's been like 2 years.
It's been a while.
I couldn't believe that, yeah, because we had Book of Boba Fett, and then if it was like following the normal pattern, we would have had Mandalorian in December, but we didn't. So we've had to wait even longer, which just feels like forever ago now. So I'm very, very glad to be back in it.
Yeah, very keen to see where it goes. It's very keen to see a lot of the characters we're familiar with, and see who else crops up as new introductions.
Yeah, because I mean, we're even in just The Mandalorian, I mean, we've only had, is it just 2 episodes with Migs? But he was already quite an impactful character, and you always wonder, like, I wonder if we'll see him again. But there's also the opportunity for new characters that will also be just as impactful. Because there's a little bit of a reset between these two things, between, you know, the first 2 seasons and this one. And so it'll be really interesting to see where we go. And if we will get any sort of cameos, crossovers with the Ahsoka live action. We know certain characters are going to show up there in their very first live action debut, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't show up in The Mandalorian first. We know that certain characters have been cast. They could keep that secret. We could see something else really cool. I know, you know, like the fact, like
the need for a lot of I know who we're talking about in terms of who might show up in Ahsoka. I'm not sure if the story's going to be quite in that direction just yet.
I guess it goes without saying, I'm curious to see if Sabine will show up in this one. She has a crossover with both the Darksaber, Ahsoka, and Bo-Katan. There was like you gave me a fright turning up in my house. That would be the main one, and I think that would be kind of fun if they introduced her in this show without kind of much fanfare. It's like, haha, she's here. That would be something that I'd love to see. Though I understand if they will keep that to be unique for the Ahsoka series and have her as like a big woohoo, she's back type moment in that show. Because I'm quite happy for them to give us some awesome new characters. I don't know that we'll even necessarily see Fennec again. Because she's tied into Boba Fett. Or whether we even see Boba Fett in this one. Because we know that they're out there. And we know that they're friends with Mando. And Mando pops in and sees his friends. He's like, hey, I need help with something, and drops in and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see if they'll reintroduce us to those characters, or feel like there's sort of like taking a breather and introducing us to some new characters. clearly they had some plans with the Cara Dune character, even to the extent of a spin-off. So I feel like there's space there for them to create some new characters, play around with something. But that's just speculation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's definitely one of those ones where, I'm like, okay, I need to watch it again, especially when I'm like taking notes and trying to remember everything. Yeah, and I'm sure there's details that I still haven't actually noticed.
Back into the scenario where we're done with the episodes to end, and now we've got to wait another week for the next material. I mean, I know we've been waiting for ages to count down to it now. It seems like a week is too long.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll wrap it up. We'll jump back on similar time frame tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's out, so we could just stream whenever, but yeah, the time zone works well for us in terms of streaming in the evening, and looking forward to it. Playing a bit more SWTOR as well. We always have fun jumping around and playing as Mandalorians in this game. And speaking of, riding Basilisk war mounts, it's going to be really, I know we use the phrase, going to be interesting all the time, but how much established Mandalorian culture or lore that they will put into the storyline, going back to the planet, or whether they're going to sort of like tweak things, sort of, refresh it. Or whether they'll pull a lot from stuff that fans are already familiar with, and they're like, oh, cool, they're referencing that old book or comic or something. Or whether they're basically going to go, this is how things are now. But yeah. Yeah, I'm done.
I guess that's it for tonight. I guess we'll wrap up here.
Yep. David's off to have another rewatch by Saturdays. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get out again before time before midnight.
yeah, we'll probably squeeze it in again. Yeah. So thank you so much for those that came along, joined us in this fan chat full of spoilers. We'll be posting this recap over on our YouTube channel, so if you want to catch up with our live streams there, or just check out some of our other Star Wars adventures, go free to check us out on YouTube. In the meantime, we'd love it if you would subscribe to us here on Twitch so you can be notified of when we next go live and join in with our Star Wars chats. But thank you so much for joining us. Catch you next time, and may the Force be with you.
Take it easy, everyone. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like, check out our other videos, and subscribe for alerts about new uploads. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.